This is kind of an earthy sermon. I'm not going to cuss in this when I preach. No. Mom, I'm not going to cuss. But I'm going to refer to someone who does. It's kind of an earthy sermon. So this is kind of like the warning disclaimer up front. If you're here today like fully immersed in Lent, feeling very pious and penitential and sort of real serious and buttoned up, this is not the sermon for you. So what I want you to do, if that's you, if you're in that boat, I want you to take out your prayer book and I want you to turn to page 845. On page 845 in your prayer books is the start of the catechism. It's an outline of our faith, and I want you to read that. It's about as long as the sermon while I preach. Do not listen to me. If you get finished early with the catechism before I'm finished, pray for me, a sinner. Are we together? You're warned. This is not for some of y'all. All right, the rest of you. You ready? All right, so here, I want to ask you a question. Would you agree that one shouldn't cuss in front of a nun? Okay, I got a few nods. Oh, Elsbeth's with me. So, I mean, just a kind of standard operating procedure. You shouldn't cuss in front of a nun. Like if you're headed out for the day before you leave the house and your spouse or partner says, hey, have a great day, try to remember, don't cuss in front of a nun. Like Daniel says that to Matt. He's like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to try not to cuss in front of a nun today. I think I can even probably pull that off. It's pretty good advice. Try not to cuss in front of a nun. All right, put that on the shelf. We're going to come back to it. Another question. What do you suppose we're here for? Like on the planet, in this life, in this universe, what do you suppose we're here for? It's pretty big, but a good existential question, right? What are we here for? Well, I know what we're here for. I do. 13.8 billion years ago, the universe burst into being with a big bang. And ever since then, all creation has been involved in what we're here for. It's what Teilhard de Chardin, Christian mystic, calls the universal becoming. What are we here for? To be a part of the universal becoming. So what does that mean? Well, to become, in our Christian way, to become is to grow day by day into a better, more loving version of yourself. You with me? That's what it means to become. It's not all that complicated. Just day by day, incrementally. Hey, don't cuss at a nun today. Just become a better version of yourself. The universal becoming, what we're all here for and a part of, the universal becoming is simply the gradual perfection of the entire universe as an expression of God's incarnate love. We're here to be a part of the universal becoming. Is that not about the coolest thing you can imagine? So we're not here to sit on the bench. Have I got any athletes in the room? There he is. We're not here to sit on the bench. We're here to play the game. So when you leave the house in the morning, your spouse or partner could say, hey, remember. Judy says this to Martin every morning, I bet. Remember, Martin, you're a part of the universal becoming. Some of y'all live alone. That's okay. When you get to work or to wherever you're going, hey, remember, we're all here to be a part of the universal becoming. It's pretty good marching orders for the day, isn't it? Now, in order to become, like there's kind of there's this little subtle little trick in here. In order to become, along with the rest of the universe, you know what we've got to do? We got to loosen up. Or as Jesus says, we got to lose ourselves. Losing yourself is loosening up in order to save ourselves. Now, what is the best way to loosen up? It's actually in Proverbs, the Old Testament book of Proverbs, chapter 17, I think it's verse 22. Laughter is the best medicine. Bill knows. One of the best ways to loosen up and to lose yourself is to laugh. Now, humans, our evolution, become conscious of itself. So we are conscious, which means we have a capacity to look at ourselves, right? A tree cannot look at itself and think about what it means to be a tree, but Bill Adams can. We can look, John Millward can. Like, you can look at yourself and reflect on yourself. Now, if you can look at yourself, what can you do? Maybe you can laugh at yourself. So humans are conscious, which means we can look at ourselves and laugh at ourselves. Now, Jesus being fully human, anybody know where I'm going? Come on now. Jesus being fully human and therefore fully conscious loved to do what? Laugh. When he was running around with those boys and those girls all over the Near East 2,000 years ago, you ever been on a road trip with somebody and not laughed? Come on. My man loved to laugh. Now, I want to ask you a question, because we're going to be a part of the universal becoming, which means we got to loosen the heck up. When was the last time you laughed uncontrollably? A while back, my beloved Kristen, I got home and she said, "Hey, Hendree, on Friday, we're going to go to the comedy club out by Joseph Beth Bookstore." And I said, "There's a comedy club in Lexington?" And she said, "Yes, we're going to it." And I said, "Great," and we went. And I laughed so hard, I thought I was going to die. No, I'm serious, y'all. I literally thought I was going to die because there was a full 2 minutes when I could not breathe, because I lost myself. Like, I totally slipped away into another comedic dimension because I was laughing so hard. It was one of those, like I was hitting Kristen because I couldn't breathe. And I thought, we're going to have to call 911. And I remember walking out into the bluegrass night after that show was over, and I felt like a different person. And when I think about that night, and I was just hitting her, about to die, I realize I am a different person, a little bit looser version of me. About 10 or 12 years ago, I went on a mission trip to Haiti with a friend of mine who's devoted his whole life to following Jesus and to leading college kids on international mission trips. We'll call this friend of mine, to protect his anonymity, Stephen Smith. He's probably, like I was thinking about it when I was writing this sermon, Stephen is probably the best guy I know. When we were on this mission trip in Haiti, we stayed in a little village up on the coast, and we did construction work and ran a dental clinic for a little bit more than a week. And our hosts on the trip were the Episcopal Church of Haiti and a group of dear, devout nuns who provided a place for us to stay near their convent, and they prepared all our meals. Now, the weather on our trip was absolutely spectacular. So Stephen and I ate breakfast every single morning out in the yard, looking out over the sea. And when we finished our food, our breakfast there, what the instructions we were given is that we were to simply take our plates to the window of a little hut in the yard where one of the nuns, one of the sisters, would take our dirty dishes to be cleaned, and then we would go on about our day. Well, on the very first day, I noticed that there was an open sewer ditch, like a poured concrete open sewer ditch running right in front of the kitchen window where we were to give our dirty dishes over to the nuns. So I made a mental note, Boy Scout that I am, to look out for that open sewer ditch, about 18 inches wide, maybe 12 inches deep, and open sewage. I made a mental note to look out for it and step over it when I came to it. Well, when Stephen and I finished our breakfast on day one, we rose to take our dishes to the window. I looked down, stepped over the ditch, and gave the waiting nun my dishes. No problem. She was a lovely woman, a petite, older woman dressed in the traditional nun's habit, head covering. When I gave her my dishes, she smiled at me. She nodded her head toward me ever so slightly and very softly said, "Thank you." Now, Stephen was right behind me. He was talking demonstrably. We're friends for a reason. And he didn't see the sewer ditch. He reached out his hands with his dish, and at the same exact time, with his right foot, he stepped full on into the odorous water with a great splash. Now, the water in the concrete ditch was deep enough, y'all, so that it spilled over the top of his work boots, soaking his entire foot, and Matt gets drenching his sock. Now, he's so surprised, like totally shocked by this, he wouldn't have done it on purpose, that he yells a cuss word very loudly. As the dishes fly from his hands through the window, where the nun deftly catches them, like she's a wide receiver for the Chiefs or something. Stephen is mortified that he has just yelled this really inappropriate cuss word in front of a nun, so he yells right on the back end of it, "I'm sorry, sister." He pulls his foot out of the ditch. I mean, it is dripping, drenched, disgusting. He pulls his foot out of the ditch, and immediately, I promise you all this is a true story, his other foot slips right into the sewage ditch. He yells the same cuss word, even louder this time, followed by an even louder, "I'm sorry, sister." He gets his left foot out of the disgusting ditch. He perches himself up on one side of the ditch, leaning on that kitchen counter deal, then inexplicably turns and steps his right foot right back into the ditch. He yells the exact same cuss word a third time now, followed by, "I am so sorry, sister." The nun was holding his dishes in her hand, staring at him with her eyes as wide as the dishes themselves and her mouth firmly closed. Stephen pulled his foot out of the ditch, stepped towards the window again, turned, and y'all, he stepped right back into that sewage ditch. By now, his shin is wet up to his knee from all of the disgusting splashing, and you guessed it, he yelled that same cuss word, louder still, followed by an equally loud, "I am sorry, sister." Then he said, "Sister." He's standing in the ditch at this point. "I cannot get out of this ditch." By this time, I am off to the side, doubled over, falling to my knees with laughter. I am totally lost. Jesus said, "You must lose yourself to save yourself." Well, baby, I was lost. Totally lost in the most hilarious slapstick scene I have ever seen in my entire life. I was celebrating the Eucharist this morning at 8 a.m. after having preached this sermon and cracked up again thinking about that scene that happened 12 years ago. Nearly lost it. Don't tell the 8 o'clock crowd. I pulled it back together. What's happening in Haiti is my friend, a devout Christian from Mississippi, the deep South, where you do not yell GD in front of a nun. He's devoted his entire life to serving the poor. He is caught in this ridiculous moment. He cannot stop stepping in this sewage ditch, yelling, GD in front of a nun. My man finally got himself out of that ditch. He got himself firmly planted on the ground, outside of the ditch. By this time, I kid you not, he is sweating profusely. He is absolutely worn out by the whole thing. We should probably all go take a nap somewhere. He looks over at me, his supposed friend, who is still laughing absolutely uncontrollable. Then he turned to the nun and he said, "Sister, I'm so sorry. This is not who I am. I tried to stop myself from yelling that terrible, terrible language, but I just couldn't." Then he said, with all sincerity, he said, "Sister, did you know that there is a sewage ditch right in front of this window? I mean, who designed this thing?" And the nun, in her habit there, was quiet for a moment. And then the corners of her closed mouth turned up ever so slightly into a smile. And she said, "It's okay, Mr. Smith. I forgive you." Then she said, "Perhaps for the rest of this day, you should watch your step." And I put my hand on Stephen's shoulder, weak from the laughter. And we turned and started back to our rooms so he could change his shoes. And at the edge of the yard, I looked back. I looked back over my shoulder at the nun. She had her hands on the kitchen counter, and her head was bowed as if in prayer. Only she wasn't praying. She was rolling with laughter, losing herself, loosening up. Now it is Lent. If you've been reading the Catechism, you can come back to us now. It is Lent. And there is a certain unavoidable rigor to the Christian way. However, that's not all it's meant to be. Just rigor. You see, we really are here for a reason. That is to play a part in the cosmic dance, the universal becoming. Because life is short. And we ought not take ourselves and everything else so darn seriously. Lose yourself. Lose your life means lighten up. Laugh a little. When you can, baby, laugh a lot. Sometimes we need to lose ourselves. I think I'm going to die. Lose ourselves in laughter. And if you should happen to slip up and cuss in front of a nun, be sure to apologize. Sorry, sister. And as you're walking away, now don't be obvious about it. Let her have her dignity. But as you're walking away, see if you can't look back. Glance back at the nun. And if you can, you're likely to see that she is laughing. And in her laughter, if you'll look really closely, you'll probably see a lightness and a loosening. And that lightness is her losing herself, playing her part in the universal becoming. And you'll know that she is being saved in that moment as she hurtles with all of us through the universe on the way to becoming one in love with Christ and God. What are we here for? To lighten up, to laugh, to become love. So when you walk out these doors after this service, say to each other, or hear me say it now, remember, you're here to be a part of the universal becoming. Lose yourself and be saved. Amen.